All right, let's go ahead and get started. Like we said, there's a little link there if you want to take the survey really quickly, and you can work on it while we're talking and going through our introductions here. We're going to welcome you to our last of 4 webinars we've held the last few Mondays in August and July on ways to engage student online. And you can see the link to the slide deck is available on there. It is also in the chat bar. Like I said, this is of 4 sessions here. My name is Jason Psycho. I'm an instructional technology consultant here at Wayne Risa, and my partner in crime through this fun is Judy Bowling, who's also an instructional technology and library media consultant here at Wayne Risa. You can say hi, Judy, if you'd like.
I was going to say good morning, but good afternoon, definitely. Thanks for joining us today.
Okay, so just some basic housekeepings, whether this or your 4th webinar, it's always good to have some housekeeping slides in place when you're working with students or other adult learners. Again, use the mute unmute button. We'd prefer that you stay muted during this time if you're not speaking. If you're experiencing any internet delays, which are always fun, try to turn off your webcam. That's usually the first line of defense to save on bandwidth. Please use the chat bar to answer or to ask any questions. We've got 2 of us here, and so we rotate answering the questions. And then if you're having technical difficulties, there's nothing wrong with dropping off, leaving the session, and rejoining it. We're not locking the session and preventing people from re-entering. So IT 101, turn it off, turn it on again, see if it works. So moving forward here, we should begin by looking back. And so over the course of the last month, literally, we have hit on a bunch of different things that are important to learning in general, but also things that we need to emphasize when we're moving into this remote environment for the upcoming school year. And so the first week we talked about building rapport and opening lines of communication, and really as simple as some of those techniques were, they really are the most important, as we know that isolation in a remote environment is a major problem. Then we started to move toward giving students more and more control and letting them work together and learning with and from each other in the collaboration session. And then pushing the envelope even further, last week we talked about co-facilitation and how students can start to take ownership and agency of their own learning. So moving forward, we always kind of begin with the why. So why are we talking about continuation and reflection? And again, what we know based on research, regardless of who's saying it, if it's Marzano, Hattie, any of the people you subscribe to or prescribe to, we know that the time for reflection is a paramount to learning, and just passing through things and passing the test and getting an A on the project really doesn't do justice to the aspects of learning as it does when students take the time to think and reflect about their learning experiences. And so when we talk about defining reflection, as we always try to do for any of these topics we've covered in the last month, we try to kind of set the stage on what we mean by the term we're talking about. Because if we don't, then we just start using the word flippantly. Oftentimes we say engagement and we don't really know what that means. So the same holds true for all the things we've been talking about this month. So for reflection, it is a systematic, rigorous way of thinking. It is social, but also individual. And it's also just taking time out to reflect on the experiences and how you can apply them to whatever's coming next, and making connections between prior experiences and ideas. And so it's one of the things we have to value. And it's one of the things we need to be intentional about. We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. The science behind it is really in metacognition, which is really how we learn about our own learning and how we think about our learning. And so what are the benefits of metacognition or improving metacognition in our students and ourselves is it helps us kind of maintain that practical optimism. We could say growth mindset, but really it's just that idea that we can learn from our past experiences and make mistakes and successes and use that to propel our learning forward. It helps us to set learning goals and how do we achieve them. And that's a key aspect that I think often gets overlooked in reflection, is that we talk about looking back, but then we really don't necessarily make that plan moving forward. We try to focus on selective attention and optimize working memory. We look at monitoring the learning progress and really just kind of seeing how these things transcend the classroom and how we can apply these things to other aspects of our lives. And so it really kind of embeds, three different ideas here. It's that reflection on looking backward, looking forward, looking inward, looking outward, and making an action plan. And we'll talk a little bit more about that throughout today's session. And really kind of making that commitment to change. One of the things that we've heard in the past is, I think I forget if it's Einstein, but the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that's where, we often look at our students and say, these are the changes you need to make. And if they do or don't make them, really determines the difference on whether or not they eventually succeed. And so, really kind of focus on that commitment and action plan as part of that reflection, as opposed to just kind of thinking about what went right and what went wrong. Also add that, what am I going to do differently and how am I going to monitor that? And so again, one of the things we've tried to do over the past month is model what we're talking about, whether or not it was in the communication, some icebreakers, whether or not it was in co-facilitation. We talked a little about student agency or collaboration, kind of let people experience that. Judy and I have really taken into account your feedback over the past few sessions. And so what I have there is actually the snapshot of the Google spreadsheet from when, at the end of each webinar, we provide a link to, that's an evaluative link, and kind of ask a bunch of questions about, some on a Likert scale, but also some open-ended questions. And you can see some of them listed there if you haven't done so in the past couple weeks. So, we describe one piece of learning that you'll be able to apply to your work. What, if anything, could be covered that didn't? And again, and Judy, feel free to chime in at any point. But one of the things that was really difficult about the past month for us is finding that balance. On one hand, we didn't want it to be all theory. And on the other hand, we didn't want it to be all tools. On the other hand, we wanted to cover multiple tools because we have such a diverse audience in these webinars, in the sense that we've got different grade levels, different subject areas, they serve different populations. So if we just focused and spent an hour talking about one tool, and a particular member of the audience could not use that tool for whatever reason, they're not a Google school, they lack that technology, they can't afford that fee, then it was for naught. So we really had to find a balance there. And you could see that reflected in the evaluations there regarding, hey, I'd like a little more in-depth directions, versus, hey, I love this tool, versus some of the other things there. So Judy, I don't know if you have any other thing you want to add, but those are kind of the things that we've had to work through over the past month when we've been designing these workshops.
Yeah, I think that you captured it well, and that just like teachers do in their instruction every single day, you do a lesson, you do an activity, and then you step back and you're reflecting on your work, not just getting our kids to reflect. And so, as Jason eloquently stated, that's what we've done, and we've taken that feedback into consideration with the development of each webinar.
And so again, we do not learn from the experience, we learn from reflecting on the experience. So when we're talking about this with students, the idea here is to be intentional about it. Just like any skill, they're going to need scaffolding, and they're going to need time to learn how to do these techniques and do them well. I'll share a personal experience as a teacher. When I first started teaching, one of our NCA goals was to do reflections with our class, but we were really not provided with a whole lot of support in doing so. And the students caught on. I would say as a science teacher, okay, we're going to do a reflection. And a kid would chime up, because we have to. And so that was kind of problematic, obviously, and it wasn't very successful. But again, that idea that is twofold. One, you needed to do it with intention, but also you needed to build it into the schedule and make it habitual. So at the same time, though, you want to make it routine, but you want to vary the type of reflection or reflective activities that you're doing with your learners. Are you doing them, at different times of the class, before the class, in the middle, in the middle of instruction, after class? Is it a quick check or something a bit more long form? How are you collecting and distributing that data? Are you doing it open as a whole class? Are you working in small groups? Is it anonymous, meaning the students actually have to do something, but if you're sharing it, their name is not attached to it? Do you display it, or do you keep it confidential? And then even the output, we can talk about a variety of different outputs for reflection. We'll talk about oral, text, But even some of the things that tools we'll look at today talk about video, audio, image, and even some ideas that you may or may not have done in your classroom already that are low or no tech that can easily be adapted to a remote environment. So we're going to do that right now, and we're going to use an example from your own lives. So we're going to give you about a minute to think about what something that you've improved upon only by making specific changes based on action. So we're going to kind of do a think, ink, share. We'd like you to actually think about it, write it down, and then we're going to share either in a chat flurry and maybe have one or two people discuss. So as you can see in the corner here, I have a little timer, which by the way, this is, if you look up YouTube and say 1 minute timer, 2 minute timer, 1 hour timer, something comes up, and then you can actually just embed that in your slide deck as a timer. So we're going to give you a minute to think about and jot down on a piece of paper something that you've improved upon. It can be in academics, but let's aim for something non-academic as well, that you've only improved upon based on analyzing what you've done and what you could do differently, making an action plan, executing that action plan, and then seeing the results based on that. So I'm going to go ahead and start the timer. We're going to have a little quiet time to reflect, and then we're going to share in the chat. I double clicked on that. I didn't mean to, but the point's taken. It's going to be a little siren. Okay, so go ahead in the chat bar and put in what you wrote, and we'll answer a couple. And if anybody wants to unmute briefly and kind of describe it, we'll take some time for that as well. So if anybody wants to share orally what they some improvement they made only based on reflection, we're more than welcome to go ahead and unmute yourself. So I see a running one. I have a marathon story involving running and reflection, and it's fun. Judy's a runner too, so we often share stories about our inner competitiveness. Oh, that's a good one. Teaching online, giving feedback. Caulking the bathroom. I'm undergoing a kitchen remodel right now. The electrician just left. The plumbers didn't do a good job of wiring my dishwasher, so the electrician had to fix their problem. Not a reflection on my part, but maintaining relationships with my students, walking 3 miles a day, power of talking less as a teacher and observing students more. These are great. See a lot of fitness ones, and that's one thing where, you know, if you're aiming for a goal and it's just not happening, it's pretty easy to change and see results, because the results are tangible. Your times can drop, your weight can drop, all these things can change, and there's tangible results there. And we can see that in our students if we give them the opportunity to reflect and create plans of action to make changes. Okay, a few more. Okay. So moving on, we talk about different modalities for reflection, and sometimes, and this gets to where we're going to head for the rest of the time today, but we really need to make reflecting visible. And if you've read Visible Thinking out of the Harvard project, Ron Richard, you know, those tools are all great tools for making thinking visible, but they're also good for making reflecting visible. At the same time, it's not bad to have students reflect out loud, either in a remote session like this, you could just unmute and have them talk, but also allowing students to hear other people's insights and reflections can help their own learning or give them ideas on how to improve. And so there's some benefit for reflecting out loud in an oral fashion. However, we want to make it visible too. For the science folks in the room, one of the things we often say in science, the difference between science and messing around is whether or not you write it down. And so if you think about it in that sense, like we're in science, oh, I can blow stuff up, great, yeah, everyone has a good time, but it's not really experimenting unless we're making observations, modeling what we see, testing hypotheses, and so on. And that involves writing it down and having an artifact. And regardless of the medium of the artifact, well, there's a document, video, audio, it provides a historical record because these are saved. They're saved things that can happen. It allows us to document our thinking and see how it's changed over time. And that's a key component of reflection that makes our thinking stronger. Look at what kids are talking about at the beginning of the school year versus October, November, December, or at the beginning of a unit or topic and at the end of a unit or topic. And again, alongside those goals, if they're typing down, they can create action plans. And again, that's really important, is having that idea that there's a call to action here, and writing goals down and writing action plans down is much better than saying, oh, I'm going to lose weight, or oh, I'm going to run a little faster, or I'm going to pay attention to my diet. Actually writing it down and posting it somewhere is very key to success in those areas. But going along those lines, let's start very basic. Some ideas of reflection can involve nonverbal cues. In an online environment, you could do thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways. You could do fist to five. You can do a traffic light. And again, these can involve your video conferencing tool, if it has those quote unquote buttons for these various things, or a semi-low tech version of that would just, in your packets home at the beginning of the year, have directions to print off something green, yellow, or red, or provide those sheets of construction paper for your students so they can hold it up during a meeting. And that would be beneficial as well. Again, some various thinking routines. And again, Judy's going to hop along and talk about some of the ways to embed these with technology. But again, these are things that you've done in your classes before. Many of you have done it in your classes before. It's just a matter of finding a way to incorporate this online. You could have an active Google Doc that you administer through Google Classroom. It could be something that everybody edits, or something that only one student has a copy of, and you would have the template for the 3-2-1 or the Connect Extend Challenge, and each student would get a copy when they open the document, and you have access to those as they're working to see how it's going. So again, the idea here is taking what's happening in your physical classroom in the past and finding ways to embed it online. And oftentimes that's going to involve such things as collaborative documents and templated examples that you can just make a copy of and then distribute to your students. But even at a younger age, or for English language learners, or for students with writing or auditory or any type of at-risk or special needs student, you can make it very simple in terms of what you're asking. It could be something just as stems that I think, I feel, I hope, I wonder, but also have some images associated with that. So those cues can help students who may not have strong command of the English language or have language difficulty can relate to and even write in their own language, and potentially even use, let's say, Google Translate to translate their thoughts and words into English for you to provide feedback for. But again, circling back to something I said earlier, is that the point is to have a scaffold for this. You can't just say, hey kids, reflect on how you did here. Provide some scaffolds, provide some sentence stems. And again, this gets to that whole idea in an environment where we're working remotely, templates in Google Classroom, templates in your learning management system, something that forces them to fill out these things. It could even be done in a Google form, if you will. So the idea here is over time, back these away, but these are good starter prompts for students to work through as they're thinking about their thinking and building that metacognitive capacity. But again, this goes beyond, this transcends the classroom, just like you talked about in your texts, in your chat bar, about using reflective practices and analyzing your past performances to make improvements in the future, these transcend the classroom. And so even from something like design thinking, if you're doing you're pursuing a STEM career, or you're doing design thinking, prototyping and testing is a reflective practice. And even for those of you who have colleagues or spouses or significant others who work in the corporate world, or who are maybe doing project management work, if you follow the project management principles, an activity, or once a project is closed, there is a specific area for closure, and that involves reflecting on what went right and what went wrong. And even some of the Scrum or Agile methodologies that are around in the corporate world or in industry revolve around those ideas of thinking and reflecting and making changes in a more rigid fashion, but it's embedded into the process. And so we need to take from that and see how we can embed these practices in our learning process. And so at this point, I'm going to do the passing of the baton here to my colleague Judy, and she's going to show you some specific tools related to these processes.
Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. All right, great. Okay, so to pick up where Jason left off, student reflection can take many forms, from a fleeting conversation about a learning experience to an in-depth analysis of a longer project. As with any technology, we aren't using it for the sake of using it, but using it because it supports the learning for what we want our students to do. And so technology tools can add variety and interest to reflection activities, which in turn helps to keep our students from being bored, and it keeps them engaged. As we think about reflection, there we go. As we think about reflection, one of the quotes I heard that really resonated was by Katie Charner. She's the author of a book called Cultivating Student Reflection, but I liked when she said that reflection is the mind's strongest glue for making the connections essential to understanding regardless of the subject matter. There are many ways to create opportunities to get our kids reflecting. It can take the shape of online collaborative projects where students get the chance to tackle a problem and reflect on their own contributions. It can also be done orally through class conversations. And oral reflection is probably the most common form of reflection, but it is the one form that allows the reflection to disappear, to evaporate from the moment that it's passed. The next most used media platform is text, the written text. There's countless ways where text can be used as the medium for reflection, but there are other platforms shown in this graphic here that can be used to capture reflections to support teaching and learning. Because we know that some kids are more comfortable with writing, but some are more comfortable with audio, and some are more comfortable with video. And at the end of the day, we want our kids to be able to be engaged and to tell us what they've learned. So many of you are probably familiar with the KWL chart, and we know that concept maps and graphic organizers can help scaffold reflection routines for our kids, as well as to help organize their information before, during, or after a unit of study. And so this chart here, the KWHLAQ chart, is an extension of that, and it just brings in and incorporates more metacognition and follow through towards that continued learning and action. And so this could be a tool in your toolkit for getting kids to reflect, and it can be something that simply uses a traditional notebook or any myriad of digital tools like Google Docs, Google Sites, if you're capturing this perhaps in a reflection portfolio. Exit tickets are another way that we can assess what our students have learned quickly and to get students reflecting on a recent learning experience. They're short. They're oftentimes simple prompts that can be easily implemented to get kids thinking and reflecting on their learning. You can combine reflective questions with content questions to understand where students are in terms of their knowledge or topic of a concept. Students can jot their reflections on paper, as with the KWL chart we just mentioned. They can be shared in a group discussion, or you can use something like Google Forms to capture their reflections. And so just as Jason had the form for folks to share their thoughts prior to the start of this webinar, it could be something where it could be a daily exit ticket, or it could be something like this, which is a weekly exit ticket. And, and at the end of this is a powerful question of, if you could design an activity to help a classmate learn the concept or skill you learned this week, what would you have them do? Because we know if kids are teaching, or at least thinking about teaching, that they understand the concept that was learned. But there are other variations that you can incorporate into these exit tickets. It could be, a variation of the see, think, wonder, which I know oftentimes is used when looking at an image to get inferences and to analyze, but it could just be something where kids think and wonder about what it was that they just experienced. It could be having kids rate on a scale of 1 to 10 their own performance or how they improved. It could be a 1-sentence summary, a 6-word summary. And again, different tools that you could use to capture those. It could be used just in the chat if you're doing something synchronous like we are right now. Creating opportunities for daily reflections, again, helps to establish routines for reflection. And then earlier we did a think, ink, and share. And so stop and jot is another variation of this, where kids stop, think, and write, where you can pose a question after watching a video or reading a passage of text, such as, what do you think is going to happen next and why? In a remote setting, you might facilitate a discussion like Jason did with our group. You might prompt students to respond in a designated writing space. It could be the chat like we just did, or if they're using paper pencil and they have a notebook, it could be that you're guiding them to perhaps draw a rectangular stop box for note taking and reflection. They could use sticky notes and place those in a special section in their notebook. An extension of this routine would be to combine it with another routine like think, pair, share, or turn and talk, where students could independently do their stop and jot and then invite them to share as a whole group or with a partner. And if you were doing this in a synchronous environment, this might be where some breakout rooms might come in if you wanted them to work within some small groups. Sketchnoting is visual note-taking. It's an effective and fun way to take notes using doodles, images, and text. So think about the last time you used colored pencils, crayons, or markers to capture your thinking. I am certainly no artist, but if you're anything like me, there is something calming and relaxing about stepping away from technology for a moment and drawing on paper. And research shows that drawing gives your brain so many different ways to engage with new material. You have to figure out how to draw it by imagining it first with detail in your mind. You then have the physical experience of actually doing the drawing and rendering that idea. And then in the end, you look back at your visual representation of your ideas. And so drawing and sketching ideas can certainly increase student focus. It can increase student engagement, as well as improve their comprehension and their memory retention. Sketchnoting also develops creative thinking skills. It allows kids to think in different ways to display their learning and to make connections to course content. It invites them to think creatively, and we know how important that is, to show what they've learned, and it encourages them to identify key points, show relationships to one another in more of a free form, whereas a concept map might be a little bit more restrictive. And then with so many of these other ideas, it's another opportunity for kids to reflect that could involve zero technology. It could involve low technology, and it could involve lots of technology. And we've included some links in the resource page on the website that you could get some additional information about that. Your reflections for kids could be just some creative short reflections. You could, and so the things here were sort of my reflections on this current webinar. And it could be that you have your students capturing a quote that reflects their learning for the day. It could be that they think about a song or a lyric that might describe their learning experience, and they could reflect on that. It could be that they identify a brand. So these are just short snippets, but just different ways to capture a moment in time around their reflection. Especially for your younger kids, they might not be using Twitter, but they could have a tweet by reflecting on their learning experience in 140 characters or less. There's some higher level thinking involved for the creation of memes. They're certainly entertaining to look at other people's memes, but having kids creating a meme to reflect their own learning can be powerful as well. And so we mentioned that oral reflections are the most common, and then the next most common would be the written text. And a lot of different ways that this could be captured. One way is just embedded in the learning management system that you might be using, like Google Classroom, Schoology, Moodle, where kids are engaged in an online discussion where they can have some reflective conversations. You could, we mentioned exit tickets. You could also have kids reflecting with quick writes, where again, they could be done low tech, no tech, or it could be something with a Padlet where there's that visual reflection where kids can see how others are responding as well as their own. Kids could be capturing their reflections in a learning log where they're asked to think about the skills they've used as they've worked through an assignment, prompts them to identify their challenges and how they worked through them. That also creates an avenue for students to request additional support or help or practice if they need it. A reflection journal enables students to think critically about their own learning and behaviors, and it helps them to transform their own learning strategies. They might need guidance to help them link their learning with the content so that it doesn't just become, a list of events of things that they've done, but again, making those connections to be more reflective in nature. A blog, most of you are probably familiar with a blog, but it is something where you would have to use some type of blogging software. So depending on what software you're using, so if you're using Seesaw with your younger kids, it's built right in there. Google has Blogger. There are other resources out there, so it doesn't necessarily matter the tool, but at the end of the day, it's where kids can capture their thinking and their reflections in chronological order. It's public for others to see, which gives the ability for others to not only see their reflections, but to also comment on them. And so, again, giving them an opportunity to reflect on their learning. A reflective essay, that might be something geared more towards the older students, but because it's a little bit more formal. And so it might be a situation where an essay question is posed at the beginning of a semester where students are expected to submit perhaps 1 or 2 essays throughout that semester that focuses in on that particular question and their the processes that they've encountered along the way in their reflections. The nice thing about, unlike the oral, which once it's given, it kind of disappears, the written does not disappear. And so by having kids capture their thinking in some type of a journal or a blog provides a way for them to look back and to see the accumulation of their writing. And so as a teacher, you want to make sure that you're periodically building in time to have kids go back and reread their journals and to compare what they knew at the beginning of a learning experience with what they know now, because oftentimes they don't do that. And when they do, they're often surprised at the growth which they've experienced, which then in turn builds their confidence. So using audio and video is another way to capture students' reflections. You could use a tool like Flipgrid, which we used earlier in this webinar series, where you could ask a weekly question where students respond to, and they could be used as another option for an exit ticket as well. Think alouds help make your thinking visible and get kids to slow down and to think about what they know and to describe perhaps decisions they are making, identifying aspects of a task that they're struggling with. It helps them to reflect on how they might manage those challenges that they encountered and how they worked through them. Students could annotate a slideshow or create a screencast to explain their thinking and process for doing something. And so one thing I want to just show too is built within, if you're using Google Docs, there is in the format menu, in the tools menu, voice typing. So here's a powerful way to incorporate audio for speech to text. So if I click on that, say speech to text can be a powerful way to capture your thoughts. So again, if you have a student that has difficulty typing or perhaps has a roadblock to typing, using tools like this voice typing tool allows them to capture their thinking, capture their reflection without that barrier perhaps of actually doing the typing. Another tool is, we mentioned Mote earlier in this series, and that's a wonderful tool, but we also learned that in the midst of this series, it went from freemium to premium. And so this other extension is called Talk and Comment. And if you can see over in the right-hand corner here, I've already installed the extension. And so it shows up in my Google Apps. It is just kind of hovering there on the side. And as soon as I click on it, it will automatically start recording. So if I click on that, say the text and comment extension allows students to record their voice. And as soon as I click on the green X, I say, okay, it's automatically copied to my clipboard. I paste it in my document, and it looks like a link, but as soon as I click on it, you see the audio button there. This tool here, just testing to make. So just another way to capture audio so that kids can not only perhaps have a barrier removed to typing, but it also the power of hearing their voice or perhaps your voice. And then lastly, before we jump into an interactive activity with you folks, is portfolios. Portfolios are a really powerful way to have kids get involved in the reflective process. And it's an opportunity for them to gather artifacts of their learning. And in many cases, it might be examples of their best performance. It might be a demonstration of where they've achieved a particular objective. It might be something of high interest where they've showed some personal or academic growth. But one of the most important aspects of this portfolio is that reflection component. And so it may be where students are reflecting on each performance and why they included that article or artifact in their portfolio. And then again, how often they are capturing the reflective thinking is up to you, but anytime you can embed any reflection routine on a daily basis helps it to become a habit. And so what we would like to do is to jump into another tool. And again, even though I'm saying tool, we're not guided by the tool, but this tool, if you're not familiar with it, is called Book Creator. And I'm going to showcase just a couple of things because what we want is to give you the experience to jump in and share your reflections for, in this case, we're going to say the webinar series. And so putting you into the shoes of a student. In a moment, you're going to jump into Book Creator. And this is a tool that if you're not familiar with it, it's a really powerful tool. It is free. And if you have a Google account, if you have a Microsoft account, you just need to be using the browser of the Chrome browser, Safari, Edge, or an iPad. So as long as you've got those things in place, you are good to go. And basically, what you get with the free version, I'm going to go here to My Books. In the free version, you get a single library of your private books, which the free version holds 40 books. And then you get one library with the ability to have 40 books. So you can have your students, if you've got a single class, you can have each student having a book in that library. And if you have more than one class, if you're a secondary teacher, there are some creative ways that you can get around that. But at the very basic, you get one library with 40 books that essentially you give your students a code. And once they get that code, they are a part of that library. And so I've already created a book that we're going to work on collaboratively. And because we're going to work on it collaboratively, that is actually part of the paid version. And so that is why on my dashboard here, you see that I actually have more than one library, and I have the ability to have 60 books, not 40 books. But the free version is perfect, and there's no functionality lost in the free version as with the paid version, but I do want to just make mention of that. And so I'm going to jump into the book that you guys are going to join in a moment. The nice thing with Book Creator, before we even create any content, is that once you've created it and it's published, you can share a link with anyone via email, via your learning management system, post it on a website, and the person who receives that link requires no special software, and they do not need to log into anything. So they will simply just click on a link and have access to your ebook, or in our case, our reflective journal. And so what we have done here is we have embedded one of the thinking routines into this journal so that we can capture your reflection. So I'm just going to demo 3 things and then put up some directions for you to join this book. And it's very user-friendly, which is one of the things that I find very endearing about this tool. But what we're going to have you guys do is use this thinking routine of sharing 3 things that you've learned throughout this webinar series, 1 question or 2 questions that you still have, and 1 challenge that you faced. And so up here in the plus symbol is where we can add our different media elements. So we're going to add text here to begin with. And so for the sake of this, I'm just going to say this is an example of text, but you can write a reflection. And one of the nice things with this too, just like we showed in Google Docs, is up here on the right, you see a microphone where, just like in Google Docs, I can click on that and it will capture my voice. I can also choose a different language if you are working with students that are, English is not their first language. So that is embedded right in there, and I will say done, and then I can resize it. And again, pretending that I captured 3 things that I've learned. Anything that I've got selected here, if I click on the inspector button over to the right, the choices that are visible will be unique to the type of element that you have selected. So in this case, I've selected text, so my inspector elements all reflect things that would be appropriate choices for text. The other thing that I can do within Book Creator, which is really nice, is I can record my voice, just like we did a moment ago. This is an example of recording voice within Book Creator. I can listen to it, I can use it. If I click on that, I can relocate it anywhere I'd like. This can be really powerful if you have students perhaps that have embedded a picture or an artifact of their work in their reflection journal here, and then they can record an audio reflection of that particular artifact that they've included in this e-journal. The other nice thing with audio within Book Creator is that if I click on that, again, come up to my inspector tool, and again, you'll see things that are now pertinent to audio, not text, because I have audio selected. But I can also click on this add transcript. So if I click on that and give it a moment, eventually what will appear on that audio icon is a little blue icon that lets me know that if I click on that, I can get the transcript for that audio recording. And so there are a lot of features built in Book Creator that meet some accessibility issues as well. And so I am going to just move that over aside. It usually takes just a moment. Close that. And then the last thing I just want to demo is if I click on that plus sign again, I've got the camera built in. And the really nice thing about this having the camera built in is that I don't, as a student, have to go to any outside resource. Everything is built right in. And because sometimes for some of our kids, having to go out to multiple different tools can be a little overwhelming for them. And so I can take a picture. I'm going to click on the record, 3, 2, 1. And at this point, I can include a video reflection of what it is that I've learned about within this webinar series. I'm going to stop that. And again, if I use it, it will become a part of my page, and I can relocate that. The other nice thing with this too is, again, if I click on this and go to my inspector button, if I click on the add captions, it will automatically generate captions for my video, which again, lots of accessibility features are built into this tool. And so what we are going to ask you guys to do, so that was like the 30-second overview of Book Creator, which, you know, we could spend a whole day going into some different ways that you might use it with your kids. But how we're trying to model it with you is we created a template using one of the thinking routines, and we are going to share it collaboratively with you so that you can share your reflections on this webinar series that you've experienced. And so I'm going to backpedal for a moment. When you join this collaborative book, you're going to first come into what might be your library, and we're going to have you click on it. And if you come up here to the upper left, you'll see pages, which will give you the thumbnails for the entire book. And so we've created a handful of pages already. So just like a Google slide, you grab one that nobody is writing on. And as soon as you click on one, if there is somebody else working on that page, you will see their name or identity appear in the lower right-hand corner. If all of the pages are accounted for, then come up here to this template one, click on the snowman dots, and you can copy to make a new page for yourself. So if all goes well, if all of the technology stars align, we will then build a reflective e-journal for you based on your thoughts around this webinar series. So to join it, what we need you to do is this. Now, some of you might already have a book creator account, and if you do, that's awesome. If not, that's okay. When you first log in, if it's your very first time, you might have a couple little questions like, what grade do you teach? Sign in as a teacher, and once you sign in, you will be in your dashboard. But if you go into the upper left-hand corner where you see sort of the hamburger lines, you'll then have an option on your dashboard to join the library, at which point then you enter in the code. And at that point, you should be in our collaborative e-journal. So we're going to give you some time right now to do that. If you would like, you can insert all of your reflections as text. You could insert them creatively using some of the ideas that we shared, perhaps with an image. You can add an audio recording. You can add a video of yourself. You can add a picture of yourself. You can get creative. And I'll toggle between the two in a moment to see that some are having success in getting into Book Creator. And one of the things that I love about Book Creator, like some of the other productivity tools out there, is that kids can start with a blank slate. And it is truly a productivity tool that is only limited by your imagination. It's very user-friendly, and it's a great way to share work with families or private by sharing a link. And so what we'll do is in the follow-up email that we send out with the recording and the website, we'll be sure that there's the link for our shared reflection journal as well. And I'll come back to this screen in just a moment, but I'm going to check in to see if folks are having some success. And I see that some people are on. Awesome. And if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat or ask them. Come back to this so people can join and get the code. Oh, if you're on a phone, yes, it doesn't work on the phone. It has to be an iPad or using a Chrome, Safari, or Edge browser. So for those of you that are accessing this on a phone, I apologize, but you will not be able to join this book. It has to be on an iPad. Or a web browser on a computer. And if you're thinking about using Book Creator as a tool for capturing reflections, think about low-tech artifacts that kids might create for their reflection and using that camera feature to take a photo of it, and then it becomes an artifact embedded within Book Creator. So it's just a nice way to collect artifacts that are digital in nature, but also using that camera to take pictures and photos of artifacts that are not digital in nature. So we're going to give about 2 more minutes. We'll leave the collaboration feature open through the rest of today. If you want to go in later and play around with it, we would love for you to do that. And thanks to those of you who are able to get in and are being courageous in the content that you are adding. I'm going to hop over to the grid view and we can see content being added. So again, the ability to do this collaboratively like we are right now, in true transparency, this is not a part of the free version, but this really is the only thing other than the number of books and libraries that you can add that is different than the free version. So if you don't have the paid version, this is not a deterrent. There are lots of other creative ways that we can incorporate building, if we wanted to, a collaborative book. But each student, as long as you have a class under 40, every student in your class can have their own book. There are creative ways where you can combine books together. If you are a teacher who has multiple classes, anything along those natures that we can help you out with outside of this webinar as well too, because again, we just gave sort of the 30-second overview of Book Creator. Okay, please feel free to continue adding your reflections. Again, we'll leave this open for the rest of the day as a means to capture your reflections. But moving ahead and to honor your time, we like to end with a quote, and this one by Margaret J. Wheatley, that without reflection, we go blindly on our way, creating more unintended consequences in failing to achieve anything useful. And as we started this with having you reflect on some things in your personal life and having students reflect in their school world, what we also want to do is develop those skills and those habits that really down the road will be lifelong skills for our students. All of these resources and more are on the website that we've been sharing with you each week. And I would encourage you to look back periodically, even from the previous webinars, because we're continually, Jason and I are continually adding resources to them. So we will share that out later today. And as always, both Jason and I really want to thank you for being on this journey this month of learning about and practicing some different ways that you can engage your students online in this remote world that we are living in. And we both hope that you found it to be helpful. We are learning with you, and we know that you are learning a lot as well. So again, thank you very much. We will stay on board if there are any additional questions that you might have. And as always, if you would be so kind as to take the survey for us so that we can continue to make improvements and do our own reflections on moving forward. So thank you once again.